As a frequent participant and speaker at Howard University's Black Writers Conference, Dr. Haki helped shape critical discussions about Black consciousness, cultural identity, and literary expression. The conference, hosted by Howard's Institute for Arts and Humanities, became a crucial platform for exploring the intersection of literature, politics, and social justice. Themes that have defined Dr. Haki's work throughout his career. The Moreland Spring Arm Research Center is proud to continue this legacy through its International Black Writers Fest. Dr. Haki's significance in the literary world extends far beyond these institutional connections. As a founder of the Third World Press, established in 1967, he created the largest independent Black-owned publishing house in the United States. Under his leadership, Third World Press has published hundreds of titles, giving voice to crucial African-American perspectives that might otherwise have gone unheard. His own poetry, beginning with his groundbreaking collection, Think Black in 1967, has consistently challenged conventional literary forms while advancing themes of Black consciousness, political awareness, and cultural affirmation. His verse, known for its innovative use of language and typography, has influenced generations of poets and helped establish the aesthetics principles of the Black arts movement. Through these varied contributions, as poet, publisher, educator, and institution builder, Dr. Haki has demonstrated an unwavering commitment to Black cultural expression and intellectual development. His work continues to inspire new generations of writers, scholars, and activists, making him an essential figure in the contemporary African-American letters. It is my distinct honor and privilege to ask you to join me in welcoming Dr. Haki with Dr. Carr, Dr. Gilliard, and Dr. Hill. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Blake. Thank you, Blake. A round of applause for Blake. We're waiting on you. We need you. So before we start, I would like our brother Brian Gilmore to launch us into our presentation with a poem.
Yeah.
And we should know that Brian is another poet that we claim. He's a writer, public interest attorney, and columnist with a progressive media project. He is also his poems and writings are widely published and have appeared in the Progressive, the Washington Post, the Baltimore Sun, and he teaches law at Michigan State University. Are you still at Michigan State or you're here?
Oh, I'm here.
You're here, where?
University of Maryland, College Park.
Woohoo! Welcome back home. We missed you. And thank you so much for this presentation. You can use this, that mic? Yes, that's fine.
All right, just a few words really fast. And this poem is from my book, Come See About Me, Marvin, which was published by Wayne State University Press, 2020. And it's called Chicago for Haki. And today is his birthday, February 23rd. And I always say that, I always tell Haki, today is also my daughter's birthday, who now lives in Chicago. So, and this is about going to Chicago on Haki's 70th birthday. We all went down and had a big shindig, you know what I mean? Chicago for Haki. Going to Chicago. By train, plane, or car, I say going to Chicago. By train, plane, or car, seems like we've been driving forever. Ain't get very far. Chicago got some people who love the lakefront gust. I say Chicago got some people who love the lakefront gust. Only wear their mittens if they mamas say they must. Sweet home Chicago, South Side love me good. Serve me fried chicken like Lightfoot said you would. But mostly because Haki has turned 70, we will be there to tell him it means something. Because Richard Wright lived and worked here on his way to Brooklyn where bigger would be born. Because one daughter wants to dance, another likes the egg on the Michigan Mile, and still another adores Chicago-style popcorn and that donut on State Street. Because Brother Q works here and he speaks to us like we also from Oklahoma. Because Krista and Kelly and Tony and so many people are here and they are not shooting anyone. And they are like a Jacob Lawrence painting, triumphant. Because my lover used to live here as a little girl and the city makes her eyes sparkle like moonlit oceans. And if her eyes sparkle, my brain swims in a pool of dark chocolate. Because she and I stroll proudly on the south side and hold hands and talk about the first time we saw Cooley High. Because we can cruise down Cottage Grove and West 77th Street, and she shows me where she once skipped rope. Because St. Sabina's Church is where she got saved, and the priest who is there for her is not afraid of black people. Because her father saw Ernie Banks hit a home run once. Because somebody loved my poetry in Chicago like it was dirty rice during a holiday meal, and so they let people eat a lot of it. Because here they take a good look at my face. Their lips move softly. Words come out like songs from the Motor City, like a mother assuring her babies, the moon is not fake, the sun is shining. The rain comes down to cleanse the world. The march of the good will always beat the bad, the ever-present rhythm of tied together time. Sweet home Chicago, please just love me good. Fry me some fried chicken, like Gwen Brooks said you would. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Brian. That's the perfect way to open this space. The way has been made. Before we do anything else, can we again recognize Sankofa, our institution, our liberated space. Thank you, Mama Sharika. Of course, Mama Sharikiana and Baba Haile. This auditorium, for those of you who are streaming, is full of folks, including, as we'll hear in a moment from Baba Haki and Dr. Gilliard and my brother Mark Lamont Hill, Dr. Hill, full of contributors to this volume. It really doesn't need a moderator here, so I'm going to get out of the way fairly quickly. Maybe a couple of opening questions, and then hopefully y'all just kind of let it flow. Since the way has already been opened by our students, I just want to mention, we come and we go. And at the beginning of last week, it will be a week this coming tomorrow, Russell Adams made transition, who was a longtime chair of African American Studies here at Howard. Yeah, but I thought about you, Baba Haki, because, yeah, absolutely, please give him, he's the founding chair of that department. But I bring him up not only because that's what we do at Black institutions, but Russell Adams helps us also enter this conversation tonight, because in the years, the better part of a decade that you taught on this faculty, and Gil Scott Heron was over at Federal City, and y'all was just tearing up the whole city. A man who was in our department of Afro-American Studies here, Stephen Henderson, ran that Institute for the Arts and Humanities. And that floor, the third floor, Founders Library, in addition to social work and other places, very sacred spaces. And while Brother Ben Talton has brought back the Black Writers Conferences, let us be very clear that the apex of Black institution building as far as Howard University is concerned was the 1970s. And we can only hope to recapture some of that momentum. And this is a down payment tonight, as you all bear witness to a human tragedy. And the last page of this book say, I guess there's a volume on Sudan being planned, coming. So for folks, I'm trying to rob some questions of, what about? No, the what about is in the book at the end. That's coming too. Sankofa regularly with Haiti on our mind, with Sudan on our mind, with Gaza on our mind, standing in our full humanity. So institution building, of course, Third World Press, we have Dr. Sakai here, who is a publisher, the next generation. Paul Coates was over at the reception earlier, Black Classic Press, just all this Black institution building here. Baba Haki, maybe we could start with when you first became aware of the question of Palestine. You were talking earlier about the Ebony Museum, which of course now the Dusable Museum, and a very interesting point of entry that you write about in here. Do you mind perhaps opening, oh, I'm sorry. Happy birthday, brother. All right, so go ahead, please. It's on you. Yes, sir.
Well, I was 18 going on 19. I was in the United States Army. And almost daily getting into battles with Neanderthal, ignorant-ass white boys. And I was about to get put out of the military with a dishonorable discharge, but there was a lieutenant, head of the base I was on, that was a missile base. He was a West Point graduate, white boy. And I would beat him in chess all the time. He could never beat me in chess. So we had developed this relationship. And he told me they're about to discharge you with the honorable discharge. I said, well, you need to do something about this. So he called a black sergeant over at Fort Sheridan and had me talk to him, and the sergeant said, okay, I'll take him in. But while I was in the military, I read close to a book a day. And each book I wrote a 250-word essay on it, but all these were black books. And there was no one I could talk to, nobody. And so there was an ad in the Chicago Daily Defender for the Ebony Museum of Negro History looking for volunteers. And so I arrived one Saturday morning and knocked on the door. And this white man answered the door. His name was Eugene Feldman. And I thought I was in the wrong place. So as I turned to walk away, he said, wait, young man, wait a minute. Who do you want to see? Did you come for the museum? I said, yes, is Margaret Burroughs here? He said, come with me. Took me into the kitchen, and this statuesque black woman was working on a linoleum cut, which I didn't know what it was at that time, but she was a world-class visual artist and cutting, linoleum. And I'm staring at her. She said, what are you looking at, boy? What do you want? She was the first black woman I met with a natural. This is 1962. Okay? And I said that I need to talk to somebody because there's no one around me that I can converse with intelligently about us. She said, go upstairs and talk to my husband, Charlie Burroughs. So I went upstairs. They had a world-class library. And he was sitting down writing. He had some, what I thought was water by his table. He said, come on in, young man. You want something to drink? I said, I'll take some water. So that's vodka. Okay. Charlie Burroughs had been reared partially in the USSR. He spoke Russian fluently. I'm probably one of the black you ever meet. I never drank, never smoked, never been high. Because my mother worked in the sex trade. Never. And so Charlie and I developed a relationship as well as mine with Margaret. Eugene Feldman was a Jewish historian from the South. So he was the one that introduced me to Palestine. Because it was Palestine, still Palestine, at least known as Palestine, but the Israelis had taken over in 48. And so he would talk to me about Zionism and so forth. But my mind was mainly on black people, okay? But that's where I first was impacted with the struggle in Palestine. But this book came about after I had traveled to Palestine, occupied Palestine, and visited Gaza, visited the West Bank. I went there with the original Hebrew Israelites.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They had been trying to get me to go for, about 5 or 6 years. And I had to get my wife's permission. And because we knew what was happening, so I went. And the Israelis kept me at the airport for about 3 hours before they let me into the country. And so that's where it really started. Then I started reading the poetry of Darwish, the actual poet laureate of Palestine. And in fact, when the many attacks, see, people don't realize that in many cases, you have to make a separation between the Zionists and between regular Jewish people who ended up there, some of the false pretenses, but many because that's where they felt was their liberated home, not knowing the politics as they are. Okay, and so when October 7th hit, it hit all of us hard, but obviously it hit the brothers and sisters who it impacted there the most. But the problem was, and is, most people do not realize how Palestinian people have been demonized, murdered, displaced. You're talking about 750,000 in 48. Okay. So I knew all that history. And when I saw our babies, and they are babies, all children are our babies. All children. It doesn't matter what culture, what race, they are babies. And so when I saw our babies being murdered, and et cetera, that's when I called Mark and called Keith. And I called Mark and suggested that he take the lead on this because he had done a profound book with the Palestinian writer. Okay? And he's halfway intelligent himself. And so I wanted to make sure that we had someone who knew the landscape. Okay? Because I knew we were going to get some pushback. That's just part of it. But let me just say one other thing. Without these two men and without the contributors, and there are several contributors here that I'm going to actually say a few words once we get into the dialogue, but I want to point out one contributor who is Jewish, and that's Jonathan Tilo. Jonathan, where you at? Right here. Jonathan, we had published his book, he had published a book on Martin Luther King Way. He and his photographer had gone to almost every city in the United States where there was a Martin Luther King. He came to Chicago and asked me would I write the foreword to the book. And after listening to him and looking into his eyes and seeing that he was sincere, not knowing that he was Jewish at the time, it wouldn't have mattered anyway, but I just said I didn't know he was Jewish. I said, okay, I'll do it. And then 20 some odd years later, the book is out of print, and we started talking again, and now Third Press has published the book. It's in our catalog. And he has not taken any royalties, he's donated everything to the press. He's just a good man, all right? And for about 40 some odd years, correct me if I'm wrong, he has been a journalist, okay, for major newspapers. And so I talked to him about this project, and he has an essay in the book. And he thought that it probably could work. And then I went to these two brothers. I couldn't sleep, that's the problem. And she would tell you, that's my wife, Dr. Carol D. Lee right here. Okay. And it was the same thing that happened when they killed Tamir Rice. When it killed Tamir Rice in Cleveland, I just couldn't sleep. I was getting up 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, writing for over 90 days. And that's how the book, Taking Bullets, came out. Okay. So I called Mark. I was able to catch him at that time. And he said, you want to take the lead on this? I read your book with the Palestinian writer, and you'd be the perfect person for it. And he agreed without any objections. And I said, I need to get somebody working with us to help out and who has the brain power, has the skills, and who's a writer and poet himself, and that's Keith Gilbert. Keith is the chair of our board at Third World Press, and he is a magnificent brother. And tomorrow's his birthday. He'll be 72 years old tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's right. We're 10 years apart, so he'll be 73 tomorrow. Okay. And so Keith and I have been knowing each other for a while, the same with Mark. And so it's been a joy working with serious black men. That's key. So I think I'm going to kind of shut it down and why don't you go, Mark?
Go ahead. No, just right quick. Just want to put this in because happy early birthday. That would be Keith. You share a birthday with the brother right there, the last living member of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, Peter Bailey. Hey, Peter Bailey is here. Where's he? Yeah, he's chilling. There you go. Go ahead, yeah, please.
Well, if you can't stand, Peter, just show your hand. I'm saying, Peter, 27 shortly. I believe I'm correct. Tomorrow? Tomorrow. But he is one of the few, if not the only, direct linkage to El-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, Malcolm X. Peter Bailey, right there. A.P. Bailey. I met him back in the 60s when we were both still very young and still think that we could take on the world without anybody. But he stayed on the case and represented and continued to represent El-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz. Peter Bailey. Thanks for coming out again.
Thank you, Bob. That's great. And in fact, that's a perfect segue to you, Mark, because while we were here at Sankofa Friday night talking about the assassination, of course, Peter was there at the Audubon Ballroom that day. You were at the Audubon Ballroom, literally hosting the ritual. And of course, this is the centennial of Malcolm's birth in May. You've been on the front lines for a long time, brother, without fear. Or if you had it, you disguised it very well. That's that Philly style. I know how you do, brother.
I had some fear now.
You know, on the way over here, we were talking about President's Day 2017. We were all together at Morehouse when he was on faculty at Morehouse and talking about the future and what the possibilities were going to be. By then, Bob Haki, you had organized the crew to, well, you hadn't yet had to. The crew, that came together to put out Not Our President, which is for sale out there as well.
It's free.
Oh, you giving it away?
Yeah, we're giving it away.
Yeah, you the man. That's what I'm talking about. See, that's what happens when you have an institution you own. You give it, and that book, unfortunately, is not out of date. Apparently now it's right back as if it were at that time. But I'm mentioning it, Mark, because there's a price to pay when you speak truth to power. That was around the same time when CNN decided it wanted to go full coward and got rid of you. But you not only have not let it slow you down, you've, if anybody has seen your interview with Chris Hedges on Al Jazeera, among many other things, I know that's probably blown up most recently, the things you've done. But this collection, close to 40 pieces, 3 parts, the middle part being poetry, that introduction from the beginning, which is really an excellent bibliographic essay by Baba Haki in terms of what to read and what not to read, and then closing it out with you, Keith, that beautiful kind of, these are the 3 points everybody should always remember as we move forward. You have been at the center of this for quite some time. A lot of voices in this anthology, a full-blown librarian writing about the destruction of libraries, ministers, spiritual leaders talking about this from every angle, but for you, someone who's deeply immersed, whether it be the language, the culture, traveling there, also the Black nationalist lens. We were laughing about that when you mentioned the Hebrew Israelites. What did it mean to get that call from Baba Haki? And how did and do you think about not only this anthology, but what we should be thinking about? Because you write quite eloquently, among other things, about the children in your piece.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it's so good to be here with everybody. Forgive me, I'm a little under the weather, but getting the call from Baba Haki meant everything to me. First of all, I mean, even as he sits up here and teases me, because I've been hard to reach. I never take it for granted, to be able to work with a giant. And I came up on Third World Press books. The reason I opened a black bookstore was because I was raised in one. Hakeem's on 52nd Street, among others. Dawood Hakeem, 52nd Street, and eventually in Atlanta as well. And it was so much of my formation. I start with Malcolm, and then Malcolm took me every place else. And the books were so important, and Third World was so important, and I didn't know what Third World Press was per se at first. I just knew that when I needed knowledge and when I needed to grow and when I needed to understand something, I would need to understand what school wasn't teaching me. I knew a lot of times that book had Third World Press on the back. And then as I began to read more and grow more as a thinker and as a student, I understood what the tradition was. I understood what it meant to publish books from everybody from, Frances Cress Welsing to Gwendolyn Brooks. I began to understand what those traditions meant. And then it became extraordinary. And then we we were in Philadelphia for the celebration of Black writers I don't want to say what year, I don't remember, but it was maybe 06, 07, somewhere around there. And Haki came to speak and to be on the panel. And somehow afterward, he asked me to go eat. And he took me to a spot on South Street. I've been in Philly my whole life. I don't live a cleaner life. You know, he said he didn't drink, didn't smoke. I took his share growing up. And so he took me to a vegan restaurant, of course. You know, I was far from a vegan. And I didn't know what seitan was. He made me eat it though. And we talked. And then I got to know him as a person. And I got to understand the tradition. And he talked to me about what it meant to build and the importance of building something and the importance of partnership. He talked about his extraordinary and brilliant wife, Safisha Madabudi, Carol Lee. And it meant everything to me to even spend that little bit of time with him. And over time, that time grew. And then we did fundraisers and we support, you know, and then Mumia Abu-Jamal and I published a book on Third World Press. And, you know, Mumia at the time could have published anywhere, not anywhere, but he could have published a lot of places. But we both thought it was important to publish with Third World Press, to invest in our own community. And from that point forward, I had like a relationship with Third World, and I was like, I'm a Third World Press author. I can't even explain to you what that meant to me to be a Third World Press author. And that's something you can't take. I don't care if they shut me down, I'm a Third World Press author. So when Haki called me this time, and was like, can we do a book together? Can we do a book together? That's like Jay-Z calling me, yo, you want to do a verse with me? What do you say? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. That's the call you've been waiting for. That's the call I've been waiting for. So I said, yeah, it didn't matter what the book, it didn't matter what the book was about, but I was moved at what he said to me. I never forgot it. And it was actually the initial title of the book. He said, son, we got to do this. I can't sleep. They're our children too. And that just kept ringing with me. They're our children too. Because I knew what he meant on all the levels. And I got to add also, you know, doing that with Keith Gilliard, who is another giant, is so extraordinary. You know, when I came into the university, the academy, there just weren't a lot of models of what it meant to be successful and keep your soul, keep your dignity, hold on to models for how to love Black people, not just in the work, which is incredibly important, but also in day-to-day interaction. Some people are great at scholarship and bad at life. You know, they don't navigate people very well. And Keith has always been a model. I mean, he's a giant in the field of English. He's a giant in the field of composition. He's a giant in the field of poetry. I mean, like, I don't want to sell that short, you know. And so it was an honor to be able to spend time with them and to build with them and to do this work. And I'm so proud of this book for that reason. But you asked me an actual question.
No, I was asking you about, no, as you write about the children, you gotta anchor your work. Don't worry, I got you, bro.
My brain ain't moving that fast today. And so, you know, for decades, over a decade, I've been focusing my scholarship specifically on the Africana presence in the Middle East. I've been trying to figure out specifically what it means to be Black, or what it means to be African, or what it means to be Afro-descendant in these different spaces, Israel, Palestine, Jordan, you know, etc. And so in the process of doing that work, and I'm finishing a film on that now, as we, in the process of doing that work, I just became more interested in the question of Palestine, as they say. But it connected me back to where I started, which was Malcolm. You know, when I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, Malcolm in '59 had been in Jerusalem, and in '64 he went to Gaza. The Nation of Islam itself was rooted in a kind of understanding of, and Black Islam in general had a diasporic understanding of who and what we were. To be an original man was to be connected to this Afro-Asiatic political diaspora, right? The original man is the Asiatic Black man, the maker, the owner, the cream of the planet Earth, the father of civilization, the God of the universe. That's what we were taught in them lessons. And so once we strip out the patriarchy and we understand it in a more complicated way and we get more invested in this or more rigorous in this, we understand the idea of saying that we're not alone here, but we have to think about this in a kind of diasporic way. By the time Malcolm, and I don't want to, I'll fast forward, but when I think about Bandung, when I think about Malcolm's message to the grassroots, when I think about Malcolm's conversations with us and his speeches with us about understanding that any kind of revolutionary action that we have has to be bound up in the liberation struggles globally. And Palestine was right there for him. In the abstract, but also in the very specific, and that becomes specific in September of '64, I believe the 17th, when he wrote on Zionist logic in the Egyptian Gazette. Now Malcolm is thinking about Gaza in particular, and he's understanding this as a colonial project. He's understanding the political economy of this. He's complicating our understanding of it, and he's dismissing the Zionist claim of ownership of a land where Palestinian people were already native and indigenously positioned. And so Malcolm takes you to SNCC, and Ethel Minor, and and there's lots of reasons to, but one of them I think is just that it's a just struggle, that it's a righteous struggle. And so when I started speaking up and out about Palestine more often, it happened sort of organically. It was coming out of my work, but it was also, again, there was an attack. There was a 51-day war on Palestine, on Gaza, in 2014, the same summer as Ferguson. So July and August of 2014, they were bombing Gaza for 51 days when we were in Ferguson resisting. And we started to see the overlaps and the struggles and the conversations happening. And so that became it became a more vocal issue for a lot of us. And I kept talking and I kept speaking. And then CNN, I was once their most used commentator, until I wasn't. When I spoke at the UN, it stopped. But what's interesting is the woman who called me, a little fun trivia for you, she called me and said, we have to let you go after your speech at the UN because your speech about Palestinians is not in line with our values. She wasn't lying. CNN's values definitely ain't bound up in Palestinian liberation. But she let me go. A woman by the name of Rebecca Cutler, if I remember correctly. And you may have seen her name if you Google today, because she is the woman who fired the one anchor on MSNBC today after she became president last week, who speaks up about Palestine, Joy-Ann Reid. She fired Joy-Ann Reid today. Well, I say her show was canceled, to be precise. But I'm telling you, at TV, that means they don't cancel your show and keep you. Right. Yeah, see, they didn't fire me, they just told me I can't come back no more. And so we sent up the Joy, and Strength the Joy, and I reached out. And so, but it's just interesting to watch, how things operate. And we can talk more about that another time. I want Joy to have an opportunity to speak for herself before I speak out, but that's public information. And so we just have to, and so there's always a price to pay for this. For the last 6 weeks, I've been getting harassed. I mean, I was telling, I think I was talking to Rose about this, but I was getting harassed. Me, Mehdi Hassan, and someone else all had our emails attacked. We to the point that we were locked out of. I had to change my phone number about a month ago. Yeah, because the harassment had gotten so bad, death threats. I mean, I got harassed more in the last month than I did from the CNN thing. And so this is all part of, the price we pay, but we do the work because the price we pay is still minor relative to the suffering that Palestinians have to go through every single day. The ritual harassment and humiliation of going through checkpoints, the loss of rights, the absence of citizenship. And we could go on and on and on, but what happened in Gaza has technically ended. The so-called war has ended. The genocide, however, has not. And while we enter month 16 or month 17, and this is the last thing I'll say, we have to recognize that the genocide, that period, that window is just a small slice of Palestinian suffering. And Israel has violated the ceasefire over 50 times now, since the ceasefire began a month ago. The children are still starving. The hospitals are still destroyed. Every university in Gaza has been destroyed. 80% of the schools have been destroyed. The hospitals are gone. The mosques have been destroyed. The artifacts have been destroyed. The archive has been destroyed. It would cost $40 billion to rebuild Gaza, and Trump is talking about not doing that, but putting them all out. So we still got work to do, and I'm just honored to be part of a righteous struggle to help do that work.
Thank you. All right, y'all, yeah, please. Brother Keith, you, and then we're gonna open it up, be in dialogue. Remember when you were up here and we were in Founders Library, we had written a little grant for the National Endowment of the Humanities. Don't have to worry about doing that for the next 4 years. But at any rate, to digitize the collection from the Institute of Arts and Humanities, a copy of which now resides in Moreland Spingarn. And we were talking, and I was just telling you how much your book on John Killens meant and means to us. Absolutely. Absolutely. Killens, of course, who spent time here at the Institute of Arts and Humanities, also at Fisk. We were talking about Baba Peter Friday night when he said, Killens said, I gave a commencement address on March the 1st, 1965 at Fisk. And so I want everybody to stand up for these people who have just made, just passed away, as he must say. Nat Cole, he mentioned, Lorraine Hansberry, he mentioned. People were standing up. He said, about half the faculty was white. And you know this story well, because obviously you wrote about it. He said, then I said Malcolm X, and I watched half that faculty begin to squat in midair. I thought about that because as Baba Haki and Brother Mark have said, and I think we all echo, you have been a giant in spaces where black folk haven't been represented necessarily. In fact, we know they haven't. But you've also stood firmly 10 toes down in that black institutional space as well. When you write here, and I just want to quote it directly, and just turn it over to you, and then we're going to be in dialogue. When you write near the end of the text that life must mean life, to call it imperialist occupation what it is, and speaking of universities and demonstrations that have been all over the country, including here at Howard, the need to recognize anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism as false equivalents, those 3 points you leave us with. Could you talk a little bit about not only the process through which you helped edit and pull this group together and edit it, but also what it means to speak truth to power in ways that could be harmful, but you've been able to navigate those spaces in ways and keep your integrity.
Let me just say something first.
Please.
I got my first national exposure at the John Killens workshop conference at Fisk University in 1968. Gwendolyn Brooks had come there the year before, along with Lerone Bennett, Leroy Jones, and a few other people. And Gwen said, you got to bring this poet from Chicago here. And John did. I had published Think Black, 67 then, Black Pride. And we weren't using black then, we were still Negroes. Okay? And so John brought me in, and I was really well received. And I got 2 job offers. One from Talladega, Catherine Hurst, and the other from Cornell. That's how I got to Cornell. But John Killens was the man. He basically went to Fisk University and put Fisk University on the map in terms of modern literature and so forth. We brought that here. See, the Writers' Conference came to Howard University because John came here.
Yes, sir.
I was here. We came the same year. It was the same year. Did he come the same year or a year after me? I'm not sure. But he came, and that's when the Writers' Conference started here. And then I took that idea to Chicago State.
Yes, sir.
That's how we got the Writers' Conference, so that whole lineage. But here, he is a leading world expert and authority on John Albert Killens.
No question.
So I just want to make sure that is known.
Well, Keith, before you go, Bob, and to close that, just to make sure the cycle comes complete, Brenda Green picks up the Writers' Conferences in part, and you got Talib Kweli, her son, in this anthology, just to make sure. It ain't but about 5 people in the Negro community, so we seeing that example right now. Go ahead.
Let me add one thing to that, though, is that John Killens came to Medgar Evers. And
Please.
that's when we started the Black Writers
Yes,
Conference.
sir. Yes, sir.
Brenda wasn't a part of it then.
Right.
But then she came on board and she kept it going.
Thank you.
All through. So that's cool. But the integrity question that you asked, I don't know they had a lot of choice. I got Haki pulling me from the front. He's one of the most committed people that I ever met. A lot of people don't know this, but the first rejection letter that I ever got as a writer, I was still a teenager, was from Haki. He probably doesn't even remember this, but I wrote to Third World Press, I sent a manuscript, and he sent back a one-page letter that said, keep on working, but you're not ready yet. That was my first rejection letter. Not the last one, but that was the first one. So Haki's pulling up front, hard to get away from that pressure, and then you got Mark kicking me from the rear. He's more gracious than me because when I first got on the Mark, I wanted to issue a gag order. It's like, shut that brother up, man, because he can't be that young, that smooth, that mellifluous, that quick. Can't be. But he was. He the real deal. So, yeah, I'm not all that humble, But I try to keep the integrity. And a lot of times we've been talking about Malcolm too. Malcolm lived in my neighborhood, and the day that they bombed Malcolm's house, I walked by it that afternoon, and I wasn't fully aware of his presence and who he was in the world, but we knew who he was in our neighborhood. And I was like, man, they trying to kill Malcolm, And so that was on the 14th of February. It was a Sunday, I remember. And I saw that they had dragged some of the furniture out, and the firemen had gone through. You know how they do. You get a firebomb, and then they wreck the rest of your house when the firemen come. So that had me thinking, as we were talking here, they had me thinking about that bomb. And then I remember, the next day, he was assassinated the next week, and then we had to come out, and police were lining the entire block, and they had the Mos 7A in Corona was guarded by police. And so I remember all that like it was yesterday. Can't believe it was 60 years ago. But then after that, I remember being in school a couple years later, and the war with Israel in the Middle East started, and people were running out of my school. I went to a school with a large Jewish population, and they ran out into the schoolyard. They said, they're bombing us. They're bombing us. I said, bombing us? Who's bombing us? And then I said, us. And when I found out what it was, I said, us. And that's when I really started developing the concepts about the whole Middle East. Then, of course, the bombings beginning October 7th, 2023. And so with that kind of work in front of you, you want to be committed, as Mark says, to the truth and to the liberation struggle. Once you get in, if you have integrity, there's no getting out, and you're gonna pay some dues, and you go ahead and pay those dues. But really, with these two brothers, it's easy to do, because you're not doing this stuff in isolation. You got someone, cutting the weeds out in front of you, taking bullets. You got somebody taking bullets, and then if you got to hand that baton off, you're putting it in real good hands when you're dealing with a Mark Lamont Hill. So that's kind of what keeps me going like that. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The three points you raised in your essay. I mean, the whole idea that you have to call a thing what it is.
Yeah. It's imperialism. I mean, it's settler colonialism. It's imperialism. You had the power. And it's funny how they make the argument about a homeland. It wasn't even your homeland. You've been displaced. You've run all around Europe, and they had to find some place to give you. So that's the deal that was broken. They said you would go ahead and take this land. This goes all the way back to Theodore Herzl, David Ben Gurion, right? This is long history to this. This is not even just about 1948 to now. It goes even back, before that. And so when you understand that, that's what it is, and you should call it what it is. It's imperialism. And every time you say something about, and Zionism is imperialism. And every time you say something about being opposed to Zionism, when you oppose Zionism, you are opposing a political project. This is a political project that you're speaking in opposition of. You're not speaking in opposition to Jewish people per se, right? Jonathan T. Love knows that, right? He's sitting right there in the audience. Love reading your essay. It's good to get a chance to meet you. So that's one point, so that you want to make that distinction. Anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism are not the same thing. And if you read the book, you will see essays by the likes of Jonathan T. Love. You will see essays by the likes of Larry Friedman, who really explain it in ways that better than I could do right now, to tell you the truth. So that's one point. Lives must be equivalent. So false equivalent, don't equate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. And that's what you see on a lot of college campuses today. If I'm at Penn State, we have a Palestinian student organization. They're afraid to speak. You know, they come see me. They come see me in secret. They won't even organize on campus because it's really too fraught with danger right now for them. But we'll work out something, you know, moving forward. But yeah, that's the prevalent mood and some of the prevalent rhetoric that's in the air around those questions, right? And even when you saw, like I mentioned, and I posted that was from a blog that I posted on October 14th, 2023. So it was a couple of days after the bombing. I was scribbling on my blog. I wasn't waiting for a book, but I'm glad the book came later. But the thing is that I remember watching the news and Anthony Blinken was on there with Netanyahu. And Netanyahu was showing them the photos and of the October 7th massacre, which is what it was. And Anthony Blinken just looked and shook his head. He said, yeah, these pictures are worth 1,000 words. You know, worth 1,000,000, not 1,000 words. That's the old saying. He said the pictures are worth millions of words. And I said, how many millions of words are the pictures of the children in Gaza worth? See, you don't want to go there, right? But then you had this mass, really annihilation campaign to really bomb Gaza back into the 18th century somewhere, you know. And so as Mark said, all this stuff has been destroyed, mass devastation. So that's
Y'all take it now. We're gonna open up now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Mark had a decision to make. And the decision was to continue to make, it wasn't a lot of money, but money they paid him to say.
It was enough.
The kids call it pocket watching these.
I'm gonna tell you right now what it wasn't. And I don't even know. It was not $10 million a year. Not what these.
Still enough, though.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, I could see the pain in him, you know. But in terms of when it was let go, I wanted it was not renewed. Put it that way. So, but I'm just saying that what he had to do personally, but what he has not mentioned that he has done personally, along with others, I'm sure. He has a thriving bookstore in Philadelphia. Yeah. And I guess we'll be going there soon.
Yeah, in March we'll be doing
Right.
a big event.
And he has up front on Al Jazeera. See, one door opens another door. Okay. And you talked about the latest interview you did with Hedges, which was masterful. And in our book, I took the liberty to pull together the dedications, but Chris Hedges is one of the people I dedicated to because he's fearless in criticism of this country and what it's done. Because essentially, you're looking at the state of Israel and this country as the same state. Right?
How about that?
So I want to thank him also, but before he speaks again, I want all the contributors who are in the book who are here to please come up here to the front. Come on. All right. It is very clear that no one is paid. No one was paid. We put the call out. We asked the writers, the poets, and we made it very clear that we're talking about black, brown, and Jewish writers and poets speak out. Okay? And these are two of the writers. Where's
Tony's here.
Where's Tony at?
Tony's around here, so he might have left.
Okay, Tony may have left.
I can't stay focused.
But T-Love and Brian. One thing about the black tradition is a signifying tradition.
No question.
Are they going to come up and sit at the front so we can get a photo?
Well, I don't. Well, yeah, when we get a photo, but they can speak from down there now rather than try to sit on the end of the stage. But before we actually say a few words, I want to go ahead, Mark, make me remark.
Oh yeah, no, it was just thinking about.
Oh, there's Tony.
Tony, come on. Yeah. Moi?
I'll keep it okay. Just thinking about this conflation of Zionism and Jewishness and anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism is by design. It's not a coincidence that, you know, when we hear people say you're anti-Zionist, that people hear anti-Semitic. That is, the project of Zionism was bound up in sort of complicating what could be an otherwise simple thing. You know, from the end of the 19th century forward, the Zionist movement had a goal, and some of it born out of good reason. I mean, anti-Jewish sentiment, pogroms, and ultimately the rise of Hitler a few decades later meant that there was a need for safety and protection of Jewish brothers and sisters around the globe. That's never been the issue. That's never been a question, and that's never been, that fundamentally isn't the problem. But to Keith's point, it's also interesting, this idea that it was destined to be in historic Palestine isn't exactly accurate. There were debates, the Basel Program or other debates that happened by the turn of the 20th century about where we're gonna put this. One of the places they looked was Africa. Right? With the Uganda plan?
Robert Weisberg's book,
Yeah.
African Zion. You can read it,
Yeah, it breaks it down. The idea is we need a place. And again, if there's a question about whether this is a settler colonial project or not, look at where they wanted to settle, right? And then when they did decide, so they had a Department of Colonization. The Zionist organization had a Department of Colonization. This was not in dispute. Herzl, but also Jabotinsky and other people who were sort of the hardliners, they were very explicit in saying this is a colonizing project. Not in dispute. There is a Jewish presence in what we now call Palestine, what we now call Israel. There's a long-standing uninterrupted presence there. That's not in dispute either. This is not to say that Jewish people don't have a presence there. But at the turn of the century, the Jewish presence there was in the single digits, around 5, 6, 7%. By the time you get to 1948, it's grown infinitely, right? Why? Not from birthing, but from waves of immigration that were dependent not just on people getting there, but also dispossessing Palestinian people, also on economic arrangements that allowed for Jewish land or for private land to be transferred. It was a committed project here. And again, it's not the issue from the indigenous Palestinian people was never we don't want Jewish people here. That was never the issue. The issue is how do we have Jewish immigration without us being dispossessed? How can we have a shared governance without domination? Right? How can we have pluralism without hierarchy? I think Molefi Asante said that, who's also in the book, along with the legendary Alice Walker. And we can go down a list of people in this book. I'm just like, so by the time you get to now, it's the same idea. It's the same idea here, right? Is that over time, Zionism, which is a political project, became conflated with a religious narrative. This is our destiny to be home. And so then it became, and then the language of Israel as a Jewish state, the flag, all these other things became ensconced in Jewish identity in ways that honestly do a great disservice and dishonor to Judaism. The most anti-Semitic act we could have is attributing to Judaism the violent settler colonial apartheid actions of the Israeli government. Can you imagine if we associated Christianity with America's behavior? And said the template for Christianity is America, the American government, and the American nation, that would be awful. And so these aren't coincidences, right? I'm gonna say just two more things. The IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism is becoming increasingly prominent. They give a list of things that's anti-Semitism, and some of them are reasonable, like, hatred of Jewish people for being Jewish is anti-Semitism. Right. But critique of Israel is also one of them. Comparing Israel to other racist regimes, they give as an example, saying that Israel was born out of racism, they see that as an example of anti-Semitism. So you can't even talk about structurally the settler colonial origins of Israel without being by definition anti-Semitic. And that has become the definition that the US Congress has adopted as the norm and that they use to censure people. So by the time you get to Rashida Tlaib getting censured for saying from the river to the sea, same thing I said, same thing a whole bunch of other people said, it's now codified in law. So these things are all part of the problem. And the wicked irony is a lot of these people in the Trump era who are so staunchly pro-Israel are also staunchly anti-Semitic. These white nationalists that are up here standing up, they hate Jewish people. They traffic in anti-Semitic slurs. They traffic in anti-Semitic iconography, anti-Semitic canards, and all the stuff you would think. They traffic in them. But because they're pro-Israel, Netanyahu et al. Are willing to accept that as the Faustian bargain because they know they'll be all right anyway. And so we have to be very careful about how we talk about this thing. We have to pay careful attention to anti-Semitism. It's a very real thing. But we also have to be mindful of the ways that it gets conflated quite intentionally. So that if I criticize Israel, I'm criticizing the Jewish state. So when the tragedy, and this is the last thing I'll say, when the tragedy of October 7th happened, and the first thing they said was, this is the biggest killing of Jewish people since the Holocaust, we're already framing this as an attack on Jewish people as opposed to an attack on Israelis. But again, the Jewish state conflates that because in Israel, your citizenship is not Israeli. And on an Israeli passport, your citizenship, they have 3 forms of citizenship in Israel. You're Jewish, you're Arab, or you're Druze, right? You're an Israeli national, but your citizenship is not Israeli, it's Jewish. So again, the conflation of citizenship and nationality and ethnicity and identity is intentional. So that again, when you attack the Jewish state, so they can reasonably say, yes, this was an attack on Jews, but the problem with that is it frames the resistance of 10-7 as an attack on Jewish people as opposed to an act of resistance against a settler colonial state. If you frame it through the lens of a slave rebellion,
Right. You do in the book.
Right.
You bring up Nat Turner, I think.
And that's the point. But if the language is intentionally muddied so that any time I'm pushed back against an oppressive or repressive state, I'm being seen as I'm pushing back against the Jewish state, and it's the Jewishness that I'm attacking, as opposed to the fact that it is like all nation states, fundamentally and unavoidably violent and divisive and exclusionary, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then it sets the table where I have no room to resist. And that's the space the Palestinians are placed in. And I don't want to go on and on, but that merits its own analysis. But I think it's worth pointing that out. It's not like we all just keep slipping and falling into anti-Semitism by accident. It's a linguistic, rhetorical, and political landscape that's laid out so that you almost can't avoid it, right? If you read Muhammad, I should know his name because I'm interviewing him tomorrow for my brain is just freezing today, but thank you. Muhammad Al-Kur's new book, but he has an essay in Mondoweiss that he talks about this. The settlers stole my house, it's not my fault, they're Jewish. And that's what he's talking about. He's like, they raided my house, there was a Star of David on the flag, they identified themselves as Jewish states, they said this is Jewish land that they're taking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, we have to be mindful to not be anti-Semitic and to protect against and warn against and fight against anti-Semitism. But the conflation of those things, again, is not just because we can't get our mind straight. That's the point.
There are
Told you about this guy. Told you.
You also should read Being Jewish After the Destruction of Gaza, A Reckoning by Peter Barnett. I'm about halfway through it now. But there's the current issue of Citizen. That's Ralph Nader's paper. Has several good pieces in it, and has an interview with Gideon Levy. It's the lead interview.
They want to make sure you put the mic up to you.
Oh, lead interview,
yeah.
right. And Gideon Levy, and his book, I just brought it today, The Killing of Gaza. Okay, you have to open it up. Yeah. Oh, right. So I just wanted to point that out in one other book, and then we're going to have the contributors say a few words. And this is the key point. The literature is out there. The problem is finding it. And why should you go seek it? But before I look for that, I want to ask Jonathan to say a few words. And then, you see, you be around Negroes too much.
What was that old poem you wrote about? You seek to integrate Negroes with black people.
I know exactly how he got here to Howard.
No question.
And then Brian too. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
This is Jonathan T.
Tyler. Hi, thanks. Haki's rendition of how we met was 99% accurate. I met him on election day 2000, the Bush-Gore election in Chicago. And I found him because he taught at Chicago State, which was on MLK Drive in Chicago, and I was traveling around with the MLKs, and I had heard about him because the sort of conceit of the book about traveling on King Streets was that there is a place that is Black America. Because there are a lot of white people who've never heard of Haki Madhubuti. But there's very few places in Black America you can go where you don't see his footprints.
That's right.
His fingerprints. So, anyway,
Hold that mic a little closer. Mic a little.
oh, when I met him that day,
They want you to look toward at least
Oh.
the program. Filmmakers that say,
this is my good side. I met him at Third World Press, which really is a kind of sacred space. I mean, the building and the church sort of atmosphere. The atmosphere. I'm a little bit hoarse. I went to Chicago because it's like the center of Black politics in America. That seemed to be the heartbeat of Black politics. And this was even before Obama. When I wrote the book, I sent Haki the galleys, and I think I was just looking for a blurb. And without even talking to me, he wrote the foreword and sent it to me. And I mean, that's like, and it was beautiful. It was better than the book. I mean, my son, whose friends are here, he was like 12 and he said, now that's good writing. But that's because of the camera. So anyway, mostly because of Haki, we kept in touch because he would check on me like every so often just to see how I was doing. And when I stopped reporting, he wanted me to do a memoir, because I come from a Jewish socialist background for several generations, and he was interested in that. And as for part of that book, I went to visit my daughter, Aria, who lives in Berlin, and we went to Poland, where my family was from, and Białystok, which had, there were more Jews in Białystok than almost any place in the world, including Palestine, where my grandfather lived there. And they were Bundists, which were sort of non-religious, left-wing Jews. And then we went to Treblinka, and we went to Warsaw. And the thing I didn't tell you was that the trip began on October 7th of that year. And so it was just overwhelming. And they describe it as the worst day for Jews since the Holocaust. And it turns out that was true, but as bad as October 7th was, it was clear from October 8th on what they were going to do. And the idea that the Jewish people, that a Jewish state could do that, having been through what they went through, was just heartbreaking and horrifying. So that's what I wrote about.
Read his essay, for sure.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan was the first Jewish writer to say yes. And he helped us to find other writers too. So I just want to make that very clear. And so we're beholden to you for helping us make this book a reality.
Hi, everybody. I just want to say that all these gentlemen right here, let's give a round of applause. They're all doctors. I'm a doctor too, so we're going to open up a clinic soon. Just to do a little happy birthday thing for Haki. Oh, damn.
On that side, brother. Can I have you on that side?
You want me?
On that side, so that I can see you on camera.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, everybody's giving me their back.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm rude. I'm from New York. I'm sorry. You know how they say you shouldn't don't meet your idols, right? It doesn't apply to me because all the idols I met have always been great, people, serious role models, and people who inspired me. And I came upon Haki when he was Donnell Lee on the covers of his books with the big ass afro and the green army fatigues and stuff. And of course the poetry blew me away, and I was like, that's gonna be my stuff too. But when I was a student, I was in the Army as well. I got out the Army, I went to Baruch College. And my first professor was Addison Gale Jr. And another professor of mine in black literature was somebody who used to date Addison Gale Jr. Not at that time, but you know what I mean? Sandra Towns. And I started writing op-eds and stuff for the school paper, and I was very controversial. I was basically considered like a school leader because of my writings. But Sandra was like, you need to meet Haki, you need to meet Haki. Unfortunately, Addison passed. He had a double stroke and he passed. And that's how I met Haki in person, was at Addison's funeral. And Sandra Towns was like, Haki, she says, Haki, you need to meet Tony Medina. You need to publish him, you need to publish him. And subsequently, he became my publisher. So I want to give that little history. But is my stuff in here?
Oh,
What page is it? I'm dominating a lot of pages in here. But when I was when this went down, it was literally on Baraka's birthday, October 7th, Amiri's birthday. And then we had like the student protests across the country. And then we had the reactionaries against the student protests and the soft, Democratic Party bullshit that took place. I needed a place. I was like Haki, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't, when these things happen, injustice anywhere just kills you. So I had to do something, and I expressed myself through poetry. So I wrote this, I was writing all these poems, and it became this Gaza suite that I thought was going to be a chapbook, but it then ballooned into a whole book itself called Because the Sky. And that's when I got the letter from Mark Lamont Hill and Haki Madhubuti. And then Keith Gilead was talking to me about the book, and I sent this whole suite of poems that's literally basically could be a chapbook unto itself. But I just want to share a piece in here. Okay, here it goes. Okay, it's called Because the Sky. Because the sky hasn't always been black smoke peppered with dumb bombs. Because the sun hasn't always wept at the sudden silence of sunbirds. Because my little bit of confiscated earth hasn't always swallowed my children, snatched from the womb. Because this battered body that once pumped blood virile as a raging river stream, hasn't always been sacrificed at the altar of vengeance, indifference, and greed. Because this heavy heart that once rode the horseback of hope, galloping galaxies of dreams, because I refuse to let them turn my spirit to stone, generations of desire into a tomb, because resistance is all I ever had in this hour of chaos riddled with bullets, because I insist on planting poems even as tank teeth gnaw and jaw and law, because what will spring from cement rubble splattered with my blood, my grandfather's olive tree, stately and dignified, yet with all due humility in the face of God, its leaves like flags waving in the wind on branches that do not break but bend and bow centuries from now.
Hello. So I first paid tribute to Haki. Many of y'all know I'm a Third World Press author. Been for years. My first book was Third World, was Elvis Presley is alive and well and living in Harlem. And you can still buy that book from Third World Press. And I mean, back then, Tony Medina tell you, we were all just poets writing, submitting stuff here. And to get lucky to get published by Third World Press, I was just like, I'm made now. I didn't even really care after that. I knew I could be a poet. I knew I could be a writer and things like that. I knew I could, I mean, the sky was the limit as far as I was concerned. I met a guy in undergrad named Fred Horde, who was also a Third World Press author, and he had encouraged me to submit my work to Third World Press when I thought I was ready, and that's pretty much what I did. So I haven't seen Dr. Horde in maybe 30 years, but I took his advice to heart. And of course, Keith Gilliard put out this great anthology years ago called Spirit and Flame. And that's when I met him. That was in the mid-90s. Same thing, it was a lot of poetry going on at the time. And so we developed a mentorship, friendship. I look at them as my fathers, anyway, my literary fathers. That's how I look at it. But my essay is in the book. It's called Rafiq, which is Arabic for comrade. And it kind of come out of a joke because I used to be signing off on social media saying, like, stay strong, comrades, like, you know, saying I'm a Marxist or something like that. Even though I was like, you know, I'm not a Marxist. I perfectly respect Marxism and communism, though. But, and I had two friends online that used to think that was funny. One was named Paul and another was Nada. And they're both Palestinians and they both live on this side of the pond. And you know, when the October 7th thing broke out, it just, I could see their rage online. And I felt like, I just started writing a little bit, and it was about my conversations with them, explaining to them how I understood the struggle and things like that. And at first I didn't understand the struggle. When I was like 10 years old, I know people in the room can remember this, the I guess I don't know what you would call them, kidnappers kidnapped some Jewish athletes at the Olympics in Munich, and they ended up getting killed So it was always framed like that. These Arabs are the bad guys. I knew nothing about any of that. I just saw the guy on every night saying, this is a terrible thing. I knew nothing about Palestine or anything like that. Israel was, for me back then, was in the Bible. I didn't even know it was a country called Israel until my father sat me down and schooled me on it. And even later on, I would get a lot of pushback if I said, this is wrong what they're doing over there to the Arab population. This is wrong what they're doing to the Palestinians. Even back then, I would get a lot of pushback. They would say, you're an anti-Semite. It was almost instantaneous if you said that. You're an anti-Semite. Almost instantaneous. So I said, I'm not even gonna say anything else. I'm gonna educate myself. So I just read book after book after book, Finkelstein, Ilan Pape, I mean, just all kinds of books. Watch films, watch really old films on the whole struggle. And you know, I came to understand it for what it was. And then I knew that it was, and then when Pape came out some years ago and he was calling it settler colonialism, I said, well, this guy is an Israeli historian, you know what I mean? And he is, why would he risk his entire career, be thrown out of the country so he could call his own country a bunch of, you know, settler colonial society? I mean, why the guy, there was no reason for him to do that. So once I read him and Howard Finkelstein's great book called Gaza, once I read him, and his latest book, Pape's latest book about AIPAC, you got to read that book. And you'll understand why America is doing what it's doing. It's all cash. It's all cash and oil. That's what it's all really about when it gets down to it. So my essay is really about my journey into that, trying to figure out what was what. And I feel like I did figure it out. I mean, I feel like I did figure it out. I felt like I expressed it well. But it's dedicated to my two Palestinian friends. One is in New Orleans and one is in Toronto. And I mean, just if you were to talk to them at the time, if you talk to anybody Palestinian at the time, I mean, it just was unbelievable, the impact on them. I mean, they were speechless, that, especially the ones who live here, they were just speechless of the US policy. And you know, they made the administration pay dearly for their policy. They made them pay dearly. Seriously, they did. I have a friend in Michigan. He was born in the West Bank. He's now an American citizen, and he was just torn up about the whole thing. But he was like, they're going to lose Michigan. And he told me that they're going to lose Michigan badly, the Democrats. He said they got no shot. So I knew that before the election was going down, and that all goes back to U.S. policy. I think Haki was the one who said U.S. and Israel. I mean, it's one and the same on this foreign policy issue. There's no separation. That's why Trump is like, it's ours, isn't it? Aren't we the ones that took it? It was just a proxy war. That's almost how he's looking at it. And it's really, really barbaric and savage at this point. Thanks.
Thank you. Let me just say, in terms of dedication, we dedicated the book to Edward Said, who really kind of began to educate all of us with Orientalism and his other books. But Noam Chomsky, you know, Noam Chomsky's Jewish, considered primarily one of the major scholars of the 20th century, and even into the he's still alive, 21st century. I remember reading him back in the 60s, 70s. You know. And the poet Mahmoud Darwish, that was the poet I bought his books when I was in Israel, occupied Palestine. And I wrote a poem for him. It's in one of my books. But Rashida Tlaib, that's who it's dedicated to, she stepped out there, as you all know, and she took some fire without almost no protection from her, other than from the squad. Okay. But many people don't know Adrienne Rich, a major poet. And she was conflicted herself. Cori Bush, Ferguson, she stepped out there, and AIPAC came at her with $10 million or more, took her seat. June Jordan, and you know, June Jordan and I were, you know, fellow poets from the same tradition, but June had jumped out there in terms of dealing with the whole Palestinian question. That's why I was reading her earlier about that. Jamal Bowman, right up there in New York. They took his seat. They put, what, $10, $12 million AIPAC put into his seat, took away from him. But one of the sisters who's been a steadfast in terms of dedication is Angela Davis. Angela Davis. And people like to put Pan-Africanists against communists or leftists, you know. But, you know, Angela's my sister, all right? And I've always come out in my own minor way to try to support her. And Norman Finkelstein, you mentioned him. He's interesting. I taught at DePaul. They were pushing him out of DePaul when I came into DePaul. And then I got pushed out the next year because I was dealing with Palestinians, okay, at one level. That wasn't the only reason. And then people are conflicted often about Cornel West. I'm not. I'm not even dealing with his run for the presidency. I'm dealing with what happened when he began to stand up for Palestinians, all right? And then, of course, Mark just interviewed Chris Hedges on his Upfront program. You should see that. It's on Al Jazeera. And thank you for that. Congratulations. You know. And I forgive you for not. I was saying, how is it a man got a PhD and can't contact me? And then I always give credit to Gwendolyn Brooks. Because she was black to me when black wasn't in existence. Okay? And then to the Palestinian people all the time. The book I was referencing that I think when they would pull out my bag, right? Things you may find hidden in my ear. They have it over at Sankofa, as well as I think I may have bought the last copy of Gideon's book, Levy's book, but they have it over at Sankofa. You want to kind of end it up?
Yeah, we looking at the chat. We got 7:36. We'll be about 20 minutes from the street. What you think?
Yes, and this is a good time for any questions.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. You need the. Oh wait, there's one right there. Folks want to come up to the microphone. You got a few minutes. Yes.
Just as a wrap-up agenda, after questions, there will be book signing. Haki's going to be signing. If the rest of the editors can join you outside, please. And note that the copies of For Gaza's Children has sold out, but you will have the opportunity to pay for another copy and order the copy. And if you want it signed, you can use book plates. Sankofa has Sankofa book plates outside, and then the authors can sign those book plates. And there are other titles outside as well. And of course, Third World Press has made available Not My President as a gift if you buy another copy of something else. So you can get a free copy of Not My President if you purchase another book as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Greetings. Good evening, everyone. Brother Haki Shakur Ami here. And let me just first say, I changed my name. I was in the Navy, just like yourself, Brother Haki, and I was 23 years old. I'm 51 now. So just want you to know, you've done a tremendous job with me adopting your name, so I hope you accept that honor. My last name is Ami. I thought I was going to be a Hebrew Israelite like Ben Ami in Chicago, and my middle name is Shakur because I was still listening to Tupac at that time. But I certainly appreciate all your books. And you mentioned Ralph Nader. He wrote a book as well called Who Runs Congress? And it's perhaps one of the most comprehensive analysis of Congress at that time. And I was going to ask a question about South Africa, but I see you covered that. Mr. Robin Kelly covered that part, but I'll kind of pivot that question in terms of black people here in America, or just say our elected representatives, comparative to, say, African countries and how they interact and their policies with Israel, such as South Africa. So I just, anyone can answer that. Brother Mark, I know you build on that as well. So thank you both. Oh, and I'll just say, you inspired me. I read 100 books a year for like 11 years. So that was your big inspiration to me. Reading should be like eating and sleeping. So that's what I did. Thank you.
the continent of Africa has a complicated relationship to Israel, like everybody else does. There's no singular policy position that the continent has. If you look just in recent history, the Trump administration won. He started something called the Abraham Accords, which was designed to be a kind of Middle East peace agreement, which is, again, just a sleight of hand. Most of the countries with whom he forged these peace agreements, there were no beef. Who has beef with Morocco? Right? We heard this, the Moroccan War. But that was one of the peace agreements. So there are parts of North Africa, there are parts of West Africa with whom Israel has normalized relations, and those are really just weapons deals. That's not about peace. It's about weapons. There are countries like South Africa that have taken courageous positions, and I often look at South Africa in sharp contrast to like Germany, where you could say after a regime of apartheid, after a regime of a human Holocaust, after these awful human tragedies, how do you respond? And I'm not trying to romanticize South Africa. There's enough post-apartheid complications around South Africa and the lack of equity and, giving people presidencies and giving people resources and land is two different things. So I don't want to romanticize South Africa, but South Africa's policy position to Palestine has been a courageous one. They're the ones who took Israel to the International Court of Justice. They're the ones who filed the suit. How beautiful was that to see that, right? Which is very different than Germany's response and much of Europe's response, which has been to say, we did an awful thing and we're going to double down on it by supporting Israel as it replicates the very thing that anyway, we all know that story. So it's fascinating to look at different parts of the continent. If you look at, for example, Egypt, they're also forging a very complicated relationship, and it's changed over the years from the 50s, during, the 1954, if you think about the Suez Canal crisis, these are moments of crisis. Then there are moments at 67, again, crisis. Then you get to Gamal Abdel Nasser and you start to see a shift. By the time you get to the more recent times, they have an ambivalent relationship. Right now, they're pushing back again because, why? Because Donald Trump is trying to send all the Palestinians into Gaza across the Rafah border. So it's a very complicated relationship. One place I think is interesting though is Ethiopia. And as we talk about Israelites, and we talk about Black Jews, I mean, it's a whole other conversation for another day, but it's a very long and complicated relationship that Ethiopia has had to Israel. The Operation Moses in '84, where Black Jews were airlifted into Israel, became a moment where suddenly, and Israel was like, take them. Ethiopia was like, take them. But it was a fascinating moment where suddenly and it became a great public relations coup for Israel, where they could exploit the suffering that was happening in Ethiopia and Eritrea, and say, hey, we're bringing our people home. And one of the things is everybody has what they call Aliyah photos, the photos where you ascend back, where you return home as Jews. Everybody else is in black and white. They always say, why are Ethiopians in color, right? It's because it happened 50 years later. And when it happened, they were brought there, and they were put in special camps, and they were put in absorption centers, and they were told that they were encouraged to take Depo-Rivera, to not reproduce. There were moral panics about them. They had to live in certain areas. I mean, we could go down a list of things that Ethiopian Jews wanted, and they were said they weren't Jews. They had to do symbolic conversions, or they had to convert and do symbolic circumcisions. And all of these things, even though the form of Judaism they were practicing, temple worship, precedes rabbinical Judaism. So when they got there, I've interviewed hundreds of them. They said, we got here, we were surprised, we didn't know any Jews were white. It's a fascinating story to think about. But Israel's policy position toward Ethiopia is very different than, say, the policy position toward Eritrea, where right now there's a refugee crisis. Eritrea, Sudan, they're like, we don't want them, even though Israel's a refugee-accepting country because they're the only democracy in the Middle East. But somehow they're not taking any black and brown refugees. And you have Africans literally going through the Sinai risking death to get to the first safe place they can get. And they're not safe places. They've been put effectively in prisons, like Hola, which is in the southern part. So all this, so again, there's no singular position. The last thing I would say is just think about, as we also talk about Israel's investments in weapons, in the weapons industry. We could look in Congo. We could look, again, there's too much, I feel like I'm fast forwarding through everything, but there's just no singular answer to that. Israel's relationship to every country is different, but the unifying thread is just like with the United States, and just like Germany, and just like France, and just like the UK, it's always a colonial posture. It's always an exploitative and extractive posture. That's the thing you gotta understand. They extract in different ways, for different people, but it's always an extractive position.
Yes, somebody else?
How y'all doing? My name is Harold Grigsby. I'm a little nervous, so I took some notes. I'm not really that good at public speaking outside the courtroom. But I came here for two reasons. Number one, I wanted to understand the Palestine struggle a little better. I'm a law student and I still wasn't educated on it properly. The best way I can try to tell people is that APEC is like the real mob. It's like the police you never heard of. My friends don't understand what that means, but when I say it like that, it makes sense. And I'm trying to learn it in a better way so I can explain it better. And I think you all have been doing a very good job, and hopefully I'll learn from the book, so I appreciate it. The second reason, I started writing my first book 2 days ago, so I started coming to the the cafes to learn more. I've only been 2-3 times, and it's really cool y'all this accessible. I don't know anything about authorship, and I ran into OG to the far right earlier, and we started talking about books and stuff because he liked my jersey. You know what I'm saying? I'm not even a Georgia Bulldogs fan. I don't even like them, but the last name is why I got the jersey. So I just appreciate y'all for being accessible. I appreciate y'all giving game when you got time, and I'll keep in touch. I'll be around the cafe writing my book, so hopefully I'll be up here with y'all one day. Appreciate it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that was all right. Yes, sir. Okay. Anybody else? And if not, this will be last open it up. So take your time. Okay, we got somebody.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Kennedy. Thank all of you for your very thoughtful writings in the book. I'm very encouraged to see all the artists and the scholars who participated. Brother Hill started talking about the Ethiopian women, the black women who were sent to Israel. And what a lot of people have to understand about those black women, Israel sterilized a large number of them so that they couldn't give birth. And I think we need to really pay attention to what's going on historically. I know Professor Hill went into the history of Herschel and the creation of Palestine. You know, we could go into the Balfour Agreement. But that history of scientific racism that created Israel, the politics that created Israel, the fact that they didn't want Israel to join, they didn't want the Jews to support Germany in World War I. That's why England basically gave them the land. We need to be very aware of how that affects us today. We need to be very aware of how that affects us today. You know, what is it that the Trump administration is doing with Elon Musk? Why are they in partnership? Why are they starting things like Stargate and transhumanism? What are these long-term historical movements that they are continuing? And what does that mean for the African diaspora? How do they see us in the future? Or do they even see us in the future? That is why Trump can easily say something like, oh, why don't we just take the land and they can move somewhere else? Because they don't see us as being fully human, and the dehumanizing effect of that is a process. They dishumanize this group, they dishumanize this group, and they say we don't need those African Americans anymore, so we're going to dehumanize them. How do you see that playing out in our next few months, next few years, according to what you already know historically? Any one of you can take the answer.
Having been involved in this mighty struggle of Africans in America toward freedom has been a part of my everyday adult life. Every day. All right. I don't ever talk about my own suffering because it comes about as a result of my decisions to fight. And as a result of the decision to, even doing the Trump book, okay? Even before we did the Trump book, back in the 80s, we had a magazine called Black Books Bulletin. and we had a special issue on blacks and Jews. And I never talk about what happened as a result of that to me personally, okay? Because that was my decision. What I'm saying, young man, is that what we are dealing with now, we've dealt with. We don't have to be afraid. The only difference is the technology. We're dealing with the new technology that did not exist when I was coming along in the 60s and 70s and so forth. But what we have to maintain, and I say this all the time, we have got to maintain families. If you don't have families, you're by yourself. When you have families, you can talk through. Then with families, you have extended families. Then you have extended communities. You got to stay strapped to these communities. Because when they come after you or come after me, they come after all of us.
Yes, sir.
Okay? And it's going to get worse because we have a man who has no conscience. We have a person who actually holds the highest office in this country who is evil. Is evil. All right? And so the history is conflicted often. So one can be a student of John Henry Clark, or be a student of Chancellor Williams, whom I taught with over at Howard University. And the reason we got the book is because of my talking and listening to, primarily listening to Chancellor Williams. Okay? That's why it's in print. Over 500,000 copies sold. Third Press, helped keep Third Press alive. And so, my brother, it is best for you to continue to be concerned. But now, where does that concern, where does that move us to the next level? Okay? And that's the key point. That's the key point.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
The book that I was referencing that I couldn't find in my bag is I may have said this.
You did.
Okay.
You got it, son.
I'm old.
No. We got you. We got you. That's your mic. Okay, we'll get these last two and then we'll get to the book signing. Then right. Okay. Yes, please.
Good evening. First, a note of thanks for you, the panelists, for being an example of courage and discipline. That's something we all can take, young and old, today and tomorrow. And certainly, I want to thank you. I speak for myself and certainly those that I know are followers of you. So thank you. My question is, what's the example you can share, all of you, that folks that are in journalism coming up, and even us beyond journalism, can take from John Rushworm and Ida B. Wells? Because I think we all should be some form of a journalist ourselves, documenting what we see. Journalism has ebbed and flowed, and I remember in the 80s, it was yellow journalism. I don't even know what we want to call some of the worst aspects of journalism. So what examples can people that are following in journalism can use from John Rushworm and Ida B. Wells, and even beyond?
Give me just a quick second, because I know Mark is getting ready to jump in this, because he's probably the most salient example I can think of in this moment. When Rushworm and Cornish said, "Too long have others spoken for us. We'll speak for ourselves now," in 1827. As Baba Haki said, the technology was very different then. So when you see Hamilton and the Anglo-African and Martin Delany publishing Blake as a serial in-net publication, that's all they had. When I think of the great journalists of the 60s and 70s, Tony Brown, who's still with us, Gil Noble, who's still, those programs that came out of Ellis Hazlett with Soul. It wasn't but 3 television stations, and it went off at midnight. And when you think about the East Coast with WNET, and then Chicago, the birthplace of what, Soul Train, I think, came out of local things that went national. Those things kind of became anchors for generations. But now we're out of that. Everything is everywhere all the time. When I think of, and I don't know how he does it, and this is from somebody who doesn't sleep much, but when Mark Hill goes live every night on YouTube, you gonna do it tonight?
Tonight we're gonna take a little break.
I'll believe that when I tune in. If I don't see Night School tonight, then I'll believe it. But I'm not sure that I won't, because I know how this brother is. I mean,
using the technology to punch through the noise, it requires a level of commitment and discipline and consistency that displaces the flashes. Like I think over the last month or two, we had something called Hillman Talk, or it's gone now. But you can count on that. It's like a drum beat. It's very consistent. And whereas Mama Safisha and Baba Haki had Institute for Positive Education, which continues to echo through the chamber. One of y'all's folks, Dr. Walton, Messi Walton, of course, who was a baby coming through there, is now in the faculty of Howard. That institution now, although those schools exist in Chicago now, the next iteration, those 3 schools that you all have, now the young people who don't go to the brick and mortar go immediately to the web. And so that type of consistency punches through the lie that access is better when you're getting hit with a fire hose. So I want Mark, if you don't mind, talk about that project, what you do. And I'm thinking about that in the context of journalism, because it's redefined what we mean. We say, even as the black press continues, by the way.
I would say commit. I mean,
yeah, I'm sorry.
Along technology, I would just say commit to the work. You know, I mean, and you figure. Actually, I started in journalism. You know, this was after Haki wouldn't publish my poetry. So I turned to journalism. I used to work for this community newspaper called Transition Press. And the first article that I ever wrote was about Angela Davis's trial.
That mic closer.
The trial was going on. Angela Davis trial was going on, and I was covering that trial for the newspaper. So I was doing that. That was 1971, I believe, when that first article came out. And I told Angela that one time, and she said, damn, we old, you know? But I would say commit to the work. The technology is going to change. Yes. Who knows? We don't even know what it's going to be, you know, down the road. But if you just commit to the work, you'll find a way, you know, to get the voice out. That'll be it. I remember I used to complain. I went to this writers retreat one time, and one of the teachers there was Toni Morrison. And a couple of us, we used to complain, and she said, you're going to get your chance. She said, just calm down. she said, you'll get your chance, you know. So I would say if you commit to the work, it's going to out one way or the other.
For the record, I'm not a journalist. I was speaking in a larger sense.
Well,
what about broadcast? But I appreciate it. I think we all have a journalistic flair if we write and if we observe and document what we see. But what about from a broadcasting perspective? And this is more standards, I guess.
I'll take, that's actually 3 things then. One, I learned early on, maybe the only valuable point that I learned from Ariana Huffington, working at Huffington Post, was she said, we don't have to take both sides of every issue. You know, she said as a policy position, we're not going to do both sides of a climate change debate. Because it ain't 2 sides. You know, the problem is in the era of cable news, where the money is in the fighting. When I worked at Fox News briefly, Roger Ailes told me that. He said, our job is to have pretty people argue.
But you were winning too much. That's why I got rid of you.
That's what he told me.
Yeah.
He said.
I remember you telling me.
Yeah, he said you winning too much. It's like pro wrestling. I was supposed to be there. If y'all remember, y'all grew up watching wrestling, I was supposed to be the guy that Hulk Hogan beat up. You know what I mean?
Arnold Stone.
Right. But I didn't want to be El Conquistador every week, so I started, you know, throwing my own suplexes and body slams and stuff. And they fired me, but the idea is that they want the tension, they want the fighting, and so they both sides of everything. When I function as a journalist, as a broadcaster, I don't feel the need to bring on the other side, a white supremacy debate. Now, I might say, I like to position an argument so that someone can tear it down. I like to say, what are they arguing here? What's their best argument? Explain to us why that don't make no sense. But I don't need to bring on everything, right? I think both siding everything is good for money, is good for spectacle, but it's not good for principled liberation work. You know, that's the first thing. Second thing is accountability. People watch my interviews with Chris Hedges, which I was very proud to do in those interviews. But the thing I'm most proud of is when I get the Israeli general on. When I get the person who's responsible for pressing that button, and they tell me, well, I had to kill those Palestinian children because there was a terrorist in there. And yes, there were 10 children there or 30 children in that school, but there was a terrorist in there, and you don't know how many lives we saved by killing that one person. And I say, well, what if there were Israeli children in there? If that same terrorist went to school with the Israeli children, and they were 30 Israeli children, we just still pressed the, oh, well, you know, no, we would have waited the next week, we would have found another way, right? So you're telling me that these children aren't worth as much as these children, because you're conceding that they're innocent too, so why are these children worth less than those children? That's the moment. It's not to convince the Israeli general that they're wrong. Because people always say, why are you debating with these crazy folks? It's not that. I didn't debate Bill O'Reilly, so I thought at some point Bill O'Reilly would be like, you know what, Mark, you got a point, let's go to commercial, right? You're right. I'm racist. That wasn't the point. The point was that the interaction had something pedagogical in it, that the people watching could get something from it that might make them make a different decision or understand the world differently. So to me, the accountability interview is something that we have to do more of. But the problem is on TV, if you watch, they do the interview, they ask the politician a question, the politician doesn't answer it, and then they may ask it half a time more, and then they go to the next question. And politicians are trained, if you just deduct the question for about 12 seconds, it's like Mike said, if you can avoid Mike for the first round, you're good. It's like, if you can avoid this first question, you can get on to, I don't believe in that. Me and Mehdi Hassan don't believe in that. Look, I'll use all 12 of these minutes on this one question. You're either gonna answer it, or you're not. And that last guy said to me, well, then if you won't move on, then this interview's over. I said, have a good day, sir. And I'm okay with that. And then the last thing is, the spectacle, using that strategically, right? You talk about Ida B. Wells. I'm thinking about, for a long time when I was at CNN, we wouldn't show Palestinian children killed. We show Israeli children bombed. We show Israeli schools killed. We'd have on the ticker, two Israeli soldiers wounded in bombing. But we wouldn't mention the fact that a mosque had just been destroyed or that a school had just been destroyed that killed literally hundreds of Palestinians. We wouldn't show it. It's like Vietnam War. Right? But once the people see it, that was King's strategy on the Pettus Bridge. Once the people see this, now they got to be accountable. Everybody ain't accountable because everybody don't think black folk human. I'm not saying that nothing's magical about the spectacle, but I'm saying I have to at least report this as it is and show people what's happening, and I think it matters. But there are people, I ain't gonna say their names, but there are people who benefit and traffic and exploit the spectacle of Black death. So when you look on your timeline or you look on their websites or email blasts or whatever they're doing these days, you'll see that they're actually doing the opposite. They're overwhelming us with Black death to the point that the Black body almost becomes objectified in that way, and people become indifferent and inured to the violence. So I try to figure out, how can I show people, just the hell with catch, how can I show those bodies hanging from lynching trees without making it desensitized, without desensitizing or being cynical about it, And I don't always get it right, but I'm always trying to get it right.
It's much easier to believe than think.
Yes.
And this is the problem. I say it's much easier to believe than think. And what you brought to your position is thinking. Because thinking requires not only studying, but it also requires follow-up questions, which most people in your position, they don't want to answer.
But also courage. It's courage. Without courage, you can't practice the other virtues.
That's it, courage, that's true.
Because they be in my ear like, rap, move on, rap. I'm sure they right.
Thank you, brother. Brother Baba Haki, Madabudi, a professor. I saw you, I think, 93, 94 at the Howard Inn back then. I was rushing to come up to see the person speak. You were featured, and I was on the elevator, but I ran right into the lounge, and you came right behind me. So great to see you again. This is a double treat for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, Mama Aya.
Blessings. I want to give praise and honor to the Most High. Thank you so much, brothers, for your courage. Yeah. We're in such an amazing time to see this being printed, to look at the picture in the back. Very pathetic. You mentioned it's a time for people to take a lot of courage. And one of I guess it's an affirmation, and maybe it's a question, it might be a statement. People are planning to stand up, walk away, not go to their jobs. February the 28th, it's a national boycott. March the 5th, It's another national boycott. There's 2 or 3 more that are being advocated. And I'm so grateful because I think that that's a way to stop the machine. You know, Harry Belafonte said when he won a prestigious award, how we just need to stop the machine by our not participating. And you all are in a position to really publicize that information and to encourage people to do that. Because it is going to take a lot of courage for people to really stop. And I'd like to know your position on it. I think that one of the most ridiculous things that this man has said is to go into Gaza and move everybody and make it a Riviera. That kind of stuff, crazy stuff. And so for us to stop that kind of crazy positions, we have to take some crazy approaches. And it's going to take all of us to have a lot of courage to do that. And I'd like to know, because of the positions that you are in, especially you, Mr. Mark, and anybody who's doing any kind of writing, powers in the pen, powers in the word. I'd like to know, do you all think that that's going to really make a difference, and do you think that we'll sustain it? You know, people may come out the first time, but they may withdraw the first time. But do you think it's going to be sustainable?
Future's open-ended, so I don't know. You know, it might, as you said, might not. They tried a bus boycott in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in 1953. Didn't last. But the people in Montgomery looked at that. That was one of the models. Theirs lasted. So I don't really know. I don't have a crystal ball that way. But I do think it's worthwhile to answer the first
You think it's
one.
worthwhile? That's.
But I think you answered part of the question, though, Keith. Because when you look at the movements coming out from the 60s and the 70s, partially into the 80s, they're all young people. You're talking about SNCC, you're talking about CORE, you're talking about even LC. You're talking about SDS. You're looking at, movements. And even when you look at what happened in Gaza, the young Jewish students who've taken their lives as well as their futures in their hands for standing up for the children of Gaza. Getting back to what we did as the children of Gaza, where you had these really billionaire Jewish businessmen, they're taking names. You're not gonna get no job here, all right? But I'm saying these are young people, and most certainly when we started out, we didn't care about any of that. We were so young, but we were so concerned, and that what was important to us is how do we fight this battle this week and move to the next battle next week, okay? And so it gets back to what you said earlier, courage. It does.
Thank you, Mama.
Yes, and thank you all, and y'all, right.
Yes, sir. Doc.
Hi, I'm Dr. Edwin C. Chapman, 1969 graduate of Howard University undergrad, 1973 Howard Medical School. 60 years ago, I was a second semester freshman in Cook Hall across the street when Malcolm X was assassinated. In 1973, Francis Welsing was my psychiatry instructor. I just want everybody to be aware that our healthcare system has now been weaponized by private profiteers. And my question is, what are we going to do about it? The assassination of Brian Thompson was just the tip of the iceberg, but I deal with it, and I'm still practicing. And I have 170 opioid use disorder patients in my practice. And getting them treatment is easier when they get incarcerated and go to the DC detention center. In 2023, there were 250 in the DC detention center on methadone, buprenorphine, or injectable naltrexone. In 2024,
There were 400. Today, there are 500. And when they come out, they're going to come out with no insurance, no job, no home, and nothing to do. What are we going to do about it?
Thank you, that channel.
I don't have an exact answer to that. I wish I did. But I do know, it makes me think of our beloved Queen Mother's question right before this one in terms of the resistance, and it ties to it to me. Any significant overhaul we're going to have of this healthcare system has to come with from an overhaul of our economic mode of production, right? As long as we're in a capitalist system, we're going to see exploitation, we're going to see extraction, we're going to see vulnerability, and we're going to see premature death. That is what this system is built upon. And so if we start from that premise, then that has to be the organizing logic of our political education. And I think that's important, because as angry and frustrated as I am about this moment of Trump, and I don't want the Trump moment to move us into a posture of despair and hopelessness. We've been through worse. Yes. And we will survive, we will resist, we will win. It's not inevitable, we gotta do the work, but we can do this. But I also don't want to isolate Trump or render Trump as some sort of exception, as opposed to maybe the most aggressive iteration and the most transparent iteration of what America is.
No question.
You know, and that becomes a really important piece, because if we keep thinking, if we could just get rid of Trump. I mean, we wrote this book, when this book was written, we didn't think Trump was coming back. When these babies were getting bombed, they were being bombed by Democrats. Right. Democratic money, Democratic weapons, Democratic protection of the UN Security Council. And frankly, if Trump had lost, I'm not even sure if there'd be a ceasefire. I'm not saying Trump is good. Trump is awful. I'm saying, and I'm not saying that they're all the same. I'm not saying that they're all the same. But what I am, because they're not, and decisions have to be made. But what I am saying is that our liberation cannot be tied to voting Trump out or waiting Trump out or and framing him as a kind of boogeyman, but rather understanding that the system itself is organized around this, whether you're Democrat or Republican, it's organized around this. I ain't seen a president yet. In fact, maybe the most generous president toward Gaza or toward Palestine has been George Herbert Walker Bush. He's the only one who actually stood up and fought against the settler expansion. Again, he's terrible. I'm just saying, like, it's universal. When we talk about mass incarceration, when we talk about it's Biden who's fighting against. He's the one who said, Blue Lives Matter, right? He didn't want to defund the police, he wanted to refund, but he wanted to invest in police more. And he did. So as we think about the healthcare system, which I don't have expertise in, I do understand though, that the system that we built is not built around anything other than, as you said, profiteering. It's the rich and then the rest of us. And that logic is always going to prevail until we change the system. And so for me, I think what we do, to get to the what we do questions, we organize, we teach, we resist, but not just thinking about presidential cycle to presidential cycle, but thinking about a real groundswell of energy toward changing and dismantling this system and imagining a world that is not yet.
Greatness, brother. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. We're going to turn it over to Mama Shrikiana, do some books, and be reminded that a brother who, I guess he's been making a lot of, been circulated a lot on social media, who wrote an op-ed in the 50s called I Won't Vote, saying that the duopoly is too much, and eventually wrote a letter, and he and his wife moved to Ghana, said chin up and fight on, but American Negroes cannot win. Whose birthday is actually today, 157 years ago, W.B. Du Bois, born February 23rd, 1868, Great Barrington, Massachusetts, but his dissertation, which turned into his first book, The Suppression of the African Slave Trade to the United States, as Baba Haki knows, because I think he's read every book that has been printed. And if you think that's an exaggeration, you haven't read Haki Mahabooty, including the chapter in this piece. And I'm proud to have a piece in Not My President, to be able to say that. But Du Bois writes at the end of that book that the correct time to correct a moral wrong is when it occurs. And so this book, For Gaza's Children, representing Brother Keith, Brother Mark, Baba Haki, and all the women and men who contribute to it, represents moving to correct a wrong. And it's never
a time when you shouldn't do that. So, thank you, Mama Sheree. Thank you, Sankofa. You want to speak on?
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of our guests. This is a time of the year where we have so many important thinking, birthdays, days of loss. Just the last 5 days, we're talking about Haki's birthday. Tomorrow is Keith Gilead's birthday. This past week was Nina Simone's birthday. W.B. Du Bois, of course, is also today. The Malcolm X's loss was on Friday, the 21st. So we just feel like we have no reason to be discouraged. Let's just look up.
Also, we're publishing Dr. Keith Gilead's book on Malcolm in terms of centennial.
Fantastic,
So
fantastic,
we're working
fantastic.
on that now.
Oh, can I mention about y'all's latest book is fire. Get that book with Herb Boyd and Don Rojas on Malcolm X, internationalism, and the assassination of CIA. Y'all just put that out in the last, 3 months or so?
And you can get those at Sankofa for sure. We're trying to keep up with Third World, doing our best, and the catalog is here, and you can get your copy outside. But I just really...
But the catalog, we brought the catalog early for you to know what we're doing so you can buy the books through Sankofa. You don't have to come directly to us, go to
Thanks
Sankofa.
for that reminder.
Look forward.
So thank you so much, Haki Madhavudi, Keith Gilead. Please give everybody a round of applause as I call their name out. Mark Lamont Hill, Greg Carr, and Tony Medina, Brian Gilmore, Jonathan Talov, and Laini Mataka, and to Howard University, Morgan Spingardt Center, and Ben Talton. We're so grateful to you, and thank you, all of you, for your investment in the liberation of Palestine.
This is Billy Mayer, right? You can announce it. Are you coming down?
Okay, Marty Williams wants us to have a group picture. It might be too late. We should have thought of it before. You know what? The book signing is taking place out here. Maybe we can do it at the table there. Signing books in the hallway, please. Are you trying to set a picture up here? Okay, he's trying to set it up. Let's do it.
Good to see you, brother. And they do this
Okay, Greg, we're trying to take a picture.
In that picture too? Down to the side.
Good to see you.
In this photo too. Yes, ma'am.
Let's go. It's a record.
Didn't even know you all stepped all the way up to the chest. Beautiful. Got it. Look good. Got it. You all just face out this way, please. That's good.
Get his copy, right?
Yeah, beautiful.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Get Dr. Hill. Let me get a couple more. The last one, this will be the best one. Can somebody hold the book up? Dr. Hill has it.
very good, very good. Got it. There you go. Got it, got it. And last one. Thank you, thank you, thank you. They got a table.
I missed that one. I'm running to the 9 o'clock one. I missed that last one. Yeah, and I got a big, where we gonna get copies?
Yeah, no, you got it. Spell the thing. All right, you're welcome. Thank you, thank you.
Think about it right here. Showed up. Really? Keep it short for that.
I'm not leaving right this big. It's a train. I got the baby in Philly, the baby with a babysitter. And I gotta be home by 11. I think I'm gonna miss the train. I was trying to get to 8:30, but. Hold 1 second, right? I'm just trying to make sure I'm making my
Check, check, check. 1, 2. Say, Gaga. Come on, come on. Say Paw Patrol.
Hey, how you doing? Give me 1 second. I'm just trying to book a train.
Oh yeah, of course.
So that I don't.
You know what? I mean, they got a table set.
Hello? Paw Patrol, Paw Patrol. Coco Melon? Coco Melon? Bluey?
How are you today?
Like a really long time. I get it all kinds of trouble.
You're a familiar face.
I appreciate it, yeah. Just very, very smart work. Trying to get back into journalism myself. Yeah, I was a print media.
Yes.
Yes. With Ahmed. Yeah. So trying to get back into it. Yeah. Like, I wonder if you have any tips for anybody.
Did somebody do it and use your I mean, you can always go to these outlets and use your own platform. I mean, as funky as the digital space is, like social media, YouTube, all stuff, at the very least you can create your own space and just get it out there. And honestly, some of those spaces are doing so much better than the corporate ones, the legacy media stuff. Just do it, and then we can talk more concretely. Like email me. Send me email. My email is my name, markmyhill@gmail.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Yeah, I got a Substack, so I'm trying to do it now.
I'm actually thinking about starting one too. They've been asking me to. I hate writing every day. I hate writing on schedule.
That's my difficulty as well.
I don't know if having an audience will make that commitment more manageable or if it'll just make you disappoint people. But for me, my worry is the latter. But if you can, please do it. Okay. I got to run because I got to talk to these other folks.
Yeah,
I got to get this train.
I will email you then.
Please email me. Give me 1 second because I want to actually answer your questions.
Nice to meet you. And your
Yes.